Alright, g'day everyone, and welcome back to Terra Invicta. I hope you all enjoyed the Humanity First playthrough, and I'm sure you're all excited to hear what's happening next. So I thought I'd introduce the next campaign and maybe play a little bit of it, although don't expect it to be releasing at the same frequency as the Humanity First one. Pushing that out at one per day was a bit of effort, so I might be able to space this one out a little bit more, intersperse guides and whatnot, and maybe even some coverage from some other titles. Let's see what takes my fancy. But the key thing I think in the last game was I played Humanity first because I thought they'd be interesting, and I played on normal because I wanted the playthrough and the tactics I used to be transferable to other gameplay. Now I think it's time to up the difficulty a little bit, and I thought about how to do it. The most obvious thing to do straight off the bat is to change the faction that we play. The Academy is described as the game's self-described hard mode for a reason. You have the strongest start of any faction in the game, but you also have the most demanding mission objectives and a number of other things that are meant to get in your way. Winning as the Academy is meant to be difficult, so obviously we're going to pick them. Humanity First wanted to destroy the aliens. The goal of the Academy is to convince the aliens that we are their equals. They want to broker a peace, but not a surrender the way the Protectorate does. And that makes their line, walking that sort of utopic, idealistic line, makes their position the most difficult to carry through to the end. The second way to increase the difficulty that I've settled on is literally just to increase the difficulty. The game gets a lot harder on Veteran, mostly because restrictions that constrain the alien behavior and what you're allowed to get away with in terms of MC cap and other things get a lot tighter on Veteran, and a lot of the training wheels get removed relative to normal. I thought back and forth on whether to play on Brutal, but I'm actually convinced Brutal would make a pretty shit viewing experience, to be honest, because what happens on Brutal is there's no restriction at all on when the aliens choose to land on Earth. The MC restriction on usage is extraordinarily tight, and if you happen to go over it and anger the aliens, their hate levels are likely to spike into total war mode and not actually go down as they destroy your stuff. So one wrong move and you can end up in a hate spiral that's very difficult to reverse. Like the worst hate spirals that you have seen on other YouTuber playthroughs, except there is no way to reverse it, and it can happen as early as a year or two into the game. In other words, if you're going to beat Brutal, the correct method, I think, to play the game is incredibly conservatively, carefully, and slowly. And I'm not convinced that actually makes for very good viewing. Veteran, I think, is a good compromise. We can get away with much less of a space economy, but still a decent one. We've got a couple of years protection from the first assault carriers and attacks on Earth. The game is a lot harder in the sense that the aliens are going to come at us harder, but at the same time, it's not as brutal, unfair, RNG prone as the highest difficulty is, quite deliberately. Instead, what we're going to do is introduce a whole bunch of house rules that make the game more difficult, but hopefully more interesting to play, at the same time as using this veteran difficulty. So let's jump into a game and let me describe some of my ideas on how to make this run just that bit more interesting and also a bit of a challenge.
We remember the day the stars answered, the day we learned we were not alone. As a familiar sun rose on an unfamiliar universe, some of us saw wondrous possibility, and others existential danger. The astronomers had insisted that the bright streak in the sky was no natural phenomenon. Most of us didn't really believe them until it burned through our atmosphere and crashed in a remote region, leaving only wreckage and uncertainty. In our ignorance, we fractured, taking refuge in our most primal emotions. Each of us saw what we wanted to see. Fear is understandable, a natural reaction to the unknown. It is only by joining together that we can rise above our base impulses. Our strength lies in our collective knowledge and our rich history of innovation. It is that bond that gives us courage. For if we cannot rise above our fear, we have learned nothing. And we are lost.
Alright, welcome back to 30 September 2022, and let's talk about some of the rules. I'll introduce more later, but let's talk about some of the rules of this playthrough. The first advantage that you have as the Academy is that you tend to have higher starting popularity around the world. It's still randomly generated, but for example, you might, as the Academy, see, as I do here, that you have 38% starting popularity in the United States and think, hey, that is my compensation for what is going to be a difficult run. The United States is very powerful. I would argue it's probably the best opening in the game because of the balance of military power, economic power, research output, boost output, mission control. If you can get into the United States and secure it, you're basically set for the early and early mid game. It's that strong. Having the American military on your side basically means that you can overthrow any non-nuclear power that you want. Europe is also a good opening. Its ability to build lots of MC and then consolidate, its research output, its population. There's a lot of advantages to starting in Europe, and between these two, I think that accounts for most starts in the game. So we're not going to do either of them. We're going to have a rule. The Western world is not where we start our playthrough, and indeed it's not even where we go in the middle of our playthrough. Instead, we are going to look for new and emerging powers to defend Earth against the alien threat. That is, we can only take over, at least in the initial stage of the game, countries that are in Asia or Africa, and the jury is out on whether South America is legitimate, but I like to think that Asia and Africa as the topics for this run is probably a good idea. Africa is a lot less developed, it's populous, but has very little else going for it. China is more expensive and more difficult to break into than the United States and doesn't have the same things the US does have going for it. For example, the Chinese have a smaller military, only 2 of them have navies. It's just less, generally the utility is lesser. So we're going to do that. We're going to save the world using Asia and Africa. Expanding using those countries is perfectly legitimate, but we can't just go dropping our counselors in America because we feel like it. The second thing is we need to remember that we're the Academy, we're idealists, so what we're seeking to accomplish should be suitably grand. We have to build a utopia, which means democracy is non-negotiable, equality is the goal, fusion technology and top quality living for all people on Earth is non-negotiable, and we need to settle the stars. Every major system in the solar system, all the way out to Pluto, all of them, all the major systems need to be substantially settled by humans and defended by the end of the game, and we need to make it a reasonable priority. The third thing is the Academy has academic standards. We like scientific research, so we will not steal other people's research, nor will we sabotage it. One of the gamiest strategies that you can deploy is to repeatedly sabotage the mission technology used by the servants to found the alien nation, for example. We won't do that, because all academic research is equally valid. There will be other house rules that I introduce as time goes on, and I'm also happy to introduce more that are suggested and voted on by people. If people don't like any of the house rules that I introduce, just comment, and if it gets enough attention, I'll scrub it. If, for example, people want me to sabotage the servant research for whatever reason, then I'm happy to do so. Also, in line with our ethical standards, we are not allowed to inflict atrocities against fellow human beings, which means no offensive nuclear weapons use against other humans. This was very easy in our Humanity First run as the USA, but in a universe where we might have to fight the Americans, it's a little more intimidating. So without nuclear weapons, we will have to be. Nuclear weapon usage against the Hydra is something I'm not sure about yet. And using nuclear weapons in extremis, well, I'll leave that up to the chat as to whether or not it's acceptable, but I'm not going to be launching any preemptive nuclear strikes, that's for sure. Regarding the other factions, I'm mostly going to try and play in line with the initiative, the Academy's ideals. I'm going to try and be diplomatic and positive with them, only retaliating when attacked, or when there is a in-character justification for doing what we do in order to attack them. Certainly at the start, we're pretty wide-eyed idealists, so there we are. In terms of the start, for full disclosure, I gave myself 3 rolls of the dice, and then decided to pick my favorite start in terms of the generated counselors, who I will name. If you want to be named as a counselor and you're a patron or something, just let me know. Patrons get first dibs, and if not enough people put their hands up, then I will go to the chat. So the first one was probably the strongest. I had a huge popularity in the United States, even better than this. It was something ridiculous. And the obvious start would have been it would have been effortless to break into the United States, probably the strongest start. The second start was complete garbage. My counselors were awful. And then I hit this one. I've got Alexander Roberts named by default. He's basically a nothing muffin. He's government Pollyanna, which are not great traits. He gives us no starting income. He's got 5 persuasion. He's a bit average across the board. He's got a bunch of investigation, espionage, but no missions to use them. He's got 4 admin, which is okay, and 5 persuasion. He's pretty meh. Eva Colares here is better. She's persuasion 8, an evangelist. She has administration 5 to start with, useless at espionage and investigation and security, so she will be immediately spotted and vulnerable if we go to war with anyone. She is prosperous, so she gives us a little bit of money. She's brazen and an opinion leader, which collectively between this means that I think her espionage is like -2 when she's detected. Like, she is very, very vulnerable, but she's also very convincing at game start, so we'll make it work. And then I've hired straight out the gate an astronaut, who again is liable for renaming. This gives us admin 6, command 7, science 6. Very little investigation and espionage, but a little bit of persuasion. This is going to be our command character if we can get organizations that allow things like coups on them. We need this character to be able to eventually assault alien asset and stage coup d'etat, which will mean attaching military organizations to them. They are, however, a military scientist, though 15% military science research, and 9 influence income at the start of the game, and that's our 3. The missing character, obviously, is an investigation espionage monkey, unless we can get Mr. Roberts here to get those missions and level those stats instead. But as a diplomat, I'm not sure that's really his cup of tea. So I selected that because the counselors are okay, but the real thing that got my attention was this stupidity. Now the academy starts with more public opinion than anyone else. That almost always happens in a start. We got 31% of global opinion, but where it happens is all over the place. Like, I've seen starts where they are like 99% Japan. Here it's like 50% Japan and something ridiculous like 82% in China, but basically nothing in India. India wants to follow the initiative. So this concentration of public opinion in China means that if we move quickly, I actually think starting in China is going to be relatively painless for us. So we could easily go into America. This is still probably easier to break into than China. But with this, a Chinese start is entirely possible. So that's why I picked the save. This is not average. This is on the outer edge, but it was within my 3 roles. I feel happy taking it, and I think it'll make for an interesting story. So those are the settings, and those are the initial limitations. We will introduce more house rules as time goes on to make things harder if we need to. But already Academy, veteran, house rules, Asia start, no Western European or North American countries. I feel like that's a pretty good start, and I'm going to get straight into it. Again, naming rights are open, but for the immediate future, let's just jump right in. So the opening goal, as I said, has to be China. And India's start would also be viable, but we have no public opinion there, so we're going to play with China as the prize. This public opinion is all going to go away eventually, once Deep System Skywatch gets researched. Speaking of which, we're going to start with management research, and we're going to try and capture one of these spots. Let's try and capture mission to space. I want to time Deep System Skywatch, which is the event, which causes the event which will completely destroy our credibility. I want to time that at a very particular moment. And it's actually after we've started to secure positions in China, and after everyone else has got most of their CPs, so they don't actually have the cap available to try and throw us out. We're sending 2 counselors to Kazakhstan because I want to secure it as a matter of priority. It's a boost source. We may or may not pull it out of the Eurasian Union. In the longer term, I won't talk about long-term goals immediately, but the Eurasian Union is one potential place that we can concentrate on gaining, but we could also start building up elsewhere in Asia, or indeed also in Africa. It all depends. Africa, I think, will require some unification technologies to become viable, but we will head over there when the time is right. Our best counselor ever is heading to North Korea. North Korea is an ally of China and in a border with them. This will give us a slight bonus to roll in the dice within China itself. Let's confirm assignments and get started. Now the key here is, do we get Kazakhstan? We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want officers and operators to give us some ops income. We want offic
Our supporters are in place.
One in Kazakhstan,
Our presence is
one in North
growing.
Korea. All nations gain one cohesion. Okay, now normally you wouldn't go for 2 slots straight out because your executive is safe if you take the first one, but I wanted both Kazakh points immediately. We will deliver our manifesto to the world for the public opinion boost primarily. We've never actually seen Castillo on the other side. This is very weird. The faction has gathered all of Earth's xenophobia in its ranks. Its followers have railed against the alien arrival without nuance, threatened humans who support finding a way to communicate with the aliens. I'm going to try not to get on their bad side. Exodus is in the neutral zone and therefore not particularly problematic for any of us. So we've gained control of North Korea. The public opinion in China is down slightly, but still at 73%. That's still entirely serviceable. I will adjust national priorities at this point. Not that we'll be staying in North Korea particularly long. How quickly does the... Let's build mission control in North Korea. Not that it really matters, but that's the most useful thing that North Korea can do right now. And Kazakhstan. I actually don't think building more boost in Kazakhstan is necessary. I might try and coup-proof the country with a little bit of spoils. How much would they want? 48%. Nah. Build some mission control instead. Kazakhstan, we will need it later. We'll have to build to democracy and whatnot there later, but considering it may or may not end up getting absorbed into a Eurasian Union, haven't quite decided yet. Let's plan the next move with China. Our fourth councillor comes ready built with a whole bunch of command stat, a little bit of admin, some persuasion, control nation, coup d'etat, stabilize, advise, detain, extract, everything we need except for perhaps assassination. So if we can even out the roster a little later, I think Dex will do a great job for us. Bringing him on board also gives us another command slot right now in terms of missions that we can attempt. What I'm considering doing is doing one more round of controls. I'm going to take a 51% in Pakistan. I'm going to send Ava to Russia, which technically borders China, to get a little bit of influence there. And Dex needs something relatively easy. But for my strategy, I think I want Taiwan. So here is the question. How much does all of China cost? 28 by 6. Okay, so what I've worked out is that taking China is basically going to basically stretch our cap to its limit. I'm currently looking at about a 25% chance to control a CP in China with Ava. I can improve this. I got a point in Russia and a point in Pakistan, but I missed the point in Taiwan. I'm working on it now. I'm hoping I get another Russia or Pakistan or both. That should increase the odds closer to 30% without a ridiculous influence spend. The other thing I'm doing is I'm quickly spoiling North Korea a little bit in order to purchase an org for Ava that is up for sale. Crossolia Biotech, which will give her an extra persuasion point and some admin. If I was really out there, I'd also try and get Ryan and company for more persuasion. Every point we get is a big benefit to her early on. We just need the critical mass to push into China. If I can start rolling 30s or 40s every turn, I'll get in. And if I can get in, well, once you're into one CP in a country, it's a lot easier to roll the rest up. So let's roll the dice and move on. I did drop a defend interest on Kazakhstan just because of how important it is. Let's keep going. And I guess we're going to get to do all the objectives again, but with a different point of view. So we've investigated alien signatures, so we now need to research the alien signatures project, which we will do, I think, immediately. It's only 25 points, so we'll finish it in a couple of days. We are winning the race to mission to space, which is good, so we will control at least one research slot early on. We'll leave the other factions to do the rest. Beautiful, Ava, beautiful.
We're taking over.
And Pakistan, okay, great, fantastic. So that should put more pressure on China. Plus 20th Guards is now under our control. Now, we could make a good game out of starting in Russia. Russia, by the way, because it is the Eurasian Union, it counts as the no EU, like it fits the no EU, no North America rule, but no further west unless it's being conquered by Russia. We also won't, I think, make it the center of the play, although I'm not quite sure yet. Okay, so Ava, you can now afford, I hope, Crossolia Biotech. which will also boost our CP cap just that little bit more. With 9 persuasion and all of those borders in place, you can now roll 25% in China, or you can do public campaigns at about 13%. We won't do that. We're going to roll up the more CPs and then get that number to 30. And as soon as I can spend 32 influence to roll a 30%, I'm going to start rolling the dice. We're losing 0.3 for control points in rival. I'm going to make that sacrifice because the strategy I want to work with relies on us locking everyone else out of the executive CP in Taiwan. Or will I? Or will I instead try... Pakistan is essentially secure, so I could pick up Tajikistan, move into Vietnam. I might have to focus on neighbor CPs at all costs. Leave with me. And we've completed alien signatures. Fragments and debris have posed more questions than answers. We've determined at least one alien survived the crash. So they have also determined there is an alien let loose. How prepared is this alien for its arrival on Earth? What will it do now? It's very possible the aliens are as ignorant of us as we are of them. They will have their own procedures, their own debates. Through watching their actions, the first clues will filter through to us. This is already a different mode of thinking to Humanity First, which was basically like, how do we find the damn thing? So our first target technologies are going to be everything we need to get our space economy going. That means outposts, it means space mining and refining, and it means the cost reduction techs for transporting stuff to orbit. So interplanetary rocketry, nuclear freighters, etc. If I do a tech guide, I will talk about this in the early space economy. So in terms of the tech that we are going to pick first, really, we can do advanced chemical rocketry, outpost HABs, or advanced electromagnetism. Because of the projects that we want, namely interplanetary chemical rockets here, I'm going to pick this one to start with, then probably outpost HABs, and then advanced electromagnetism. Mostly because we also want the projects falling off this one, not the other, but we also don't want to send stuff to space without at least a little bit of cost reduction. So that's the plan there. Now, for the roleplay here, we will emphasize international aid, welfare, and knowledge are kind of our thing. Hooray, we've taken Laos. That's something. Let's see what's going on over here. Resistance is setting up in the European Union with control points in Germany and France. The servants are in the United Kingdom. I feel like I've seen this film before, and I didn't particularly like the ending. United States is still clear. Africa, spattering of Humanity First. India, I'm surprised no Exodus is in, no initiative are in India yet, but I would expect them to move in soon. Italy is contested between Resistance and Humanity First. Overall, I think we're quickest out of the gate, and the Humanity First are in Turkey. Oh, look, it's everyone's favourite, Kiran Banerjee of the Protectorate. We're meant to get along with everyone as the Academy, but it's going to be really difficult for me to be okay with Mr. Banerjee. But at the start of the game, there's actually not a huge difference between our positions. So far as tips go for a China run, I think it's this. Firstly, persistence pays off. If you have to roll 4 or 5 times in order to get your first 2 points, that's okay. Second, spoiling early in order to get a couple of boosting orgs is useful. Eva here has +1 persuasion from here, plus another one from there, +2 from Shinhofen Books over here, which gives her a nice +4 to her natural resting persuasion. That gives her better odds. Surrounding China is useful, and playing Academy is probably your best option, but any faction can, hypothetically, roll a lot of their starting public opinion in China. It's just uncommon. But if you see China with a concentration of public opinion at the start of the game, there's your option. At the moment, having secured the first 2 control points and all of those boosts taken into account, Eva is now rolling an 82% chance in order to take control point number 3, the first one in China that will give us an army. I'll then have to decide what my opening priorities for China are. I think the 2 that I want to worry about, I don't really want to worry about knowledge. I do want to worry about the economy, and I want to worry about getting a navy, and to an extent also military upgrades. A 3rd navy would give me a complement of 3 of China's armies that can actually go overseas, and as far as I'm concerned, an army that can't go overseas is basically useless. Anyway, let's lock in Control Nation there. The other tip I'll have is if your starting council lineup isn't good, feel free to fire them. I fired my Australian diplomat, he's gone, and in is Baris Yakin here from Turkey, or Yakin or Yakin. Barris here has 3 persuasion, but 5 command, 4 admin. Decent stats here, but 7 investigation and 6 espionage with both crackdown and purge and detain. He doesn't have assassinate, but that can be added later. So he is useful. His specials are not amazing, but he was the best of the bunch that was available, and he starts to give us an investigation espionage character. So we have one inv esp character, we've got one super high command character, we've got a command administration persuasion, we've got a hybrid in the form of the astronaut, and we've got a super high persuasion monkey in the form of Ava. All of them obviously I'll rename, but for the moment they are who they are. Soon clandestine cells will drop and we'll have a 5th slot available to fill in the roster just that bit more. For the moment we are going over control point cap. Once I get my next China point, I'm probably going to drop Pakistan. One tip, when you're about to drop a country at the last minute, my tip was, once you're about, I didn't know I was spoiling Myanmar, that must have been, I must have forgot I was doing that. But it's okay, that's obviously paying for our early orgs and it doesn't hurt Myanmar that much. Switch them all to something you're going to want to do later so they sit on the default. Either build their economy or put it all into spaceflight program, shut off spoils, and then abandon the nation, because I believe the priority continues to fire even if you're not there. So those are some tips to opening. Our takeover of China is going relatively well. Aliens have crashed in Mongolia, so we will go and investigate that.
Ready for my mission.
I think we now have the non-executive points in Taiwan, so we should be okay. If we now secure interests on those, we should be able to hold on to them.
Making things safe for our
And the
people.
priority for Taiwan, not that it will be useful for some time, but what Taiwan really needs is an army, and also the highest democracy score it can possibly get. Because like I said, shenanigans on planet Earth are allowed. Shenanigans against the aliens are gamey. But if we're going to unify the world and build a utopia, well, I've got to be allowed to do some shenanigans to paint the map on planet Earth. Let's go. Alright, so we have an alien operative that's clearly walked from Mongolia to into mainland China and is now performing abductions, which isn't great. I would have preferred the alien spawned on another continent, to be honest, but I'm going to have to deal with him, the bastard. At the start of the game, spoiler here, the Hydra can't fly. They move province to province, I believe, at the start of the game. So basically, we're stuck with him in mainland China for a while until we can get the techs necessary to assassinate or capture him, for scientific purposes. So that's unfortunate for the moment. We did grab the extra point in China with our 80% chance. We can now abandon Pakistan. We've turned it over to a mixture of economy and spaceflight program. In fact, I'm going to go even more in on the spaceflight program, 50% spaceflight program. So if we take it back over later, there's more odds that there's something useful there. We'll now abandon the nation and leave it be, bringing us down to 215 over 180. That seems really oppressive, but we're about to hit We Are Not Alone, and hopefully they'll pick clandestine cells next. Okay, so the servants have finished their research and they've chosen Deep System Skywatch, which means it's coming pretty early on. I'm actually okay with this. In fact, if anything, I'm considering how quickly could I get it we could get it very, very quickly if we just rushed it. Because if we rush it, then the damage will be mitigated. The only points that I'm really worried about are Kazakhstan. So one thing we might want to do is not put everything into it, because here's the goal: either you do it straight away before you take all of China, because once you've got the bureaucracy point here, bonus to control nations is very significant from owning this point, that you can sort of survive the loss of public opinion and take the rest of China and you don't run the risk of being cracked down. Or you take all of China, then you accept the crackdown and you use the full benefit of the public opinion. I kind of want to push this through as fast as possible. I'm thinking 5th January actually works for me on my current schedule. It might threaten Kazakhstan, but it is what it is, and then we'll get back to other research. 74th Group Army is now under our control. So we will persist with this split economy Navy investment. Probably even more economy, to be honest, but I will decide that after this initial rush. We'll investigate alien activity.
Service.
Acknowledged.
Ava can secure yet another point in China. One thing to check though.
Standing by for orders.
You want everyone to sort of be at their control point cap before it hits. So we will actually stick to this. I just want everyone to have time to fill out their national rosters a little bit more so they don't actually have the points to move into China because of how expensive the Chinese CPs are, and then we'll just roll through the delay. And then right before Deep System Skywatch fires, we might try and grab some small nations if we can afford it. Right now we can barely even afford bloody China. I think it's probably time to let Russia go. Because how much is Russia costing me? 15, 30, 45. I can get rid of some of these smaller nations. Vietnam is costing me 30. So that solves the problem temporarily. Vietnam, what Vietnam really needs is a spaceflight program, welfare, and economic investment. And no spoils. That's what the people of Vietnam need. Solve that, improve that. Do they need a spaceflight program? No, they need knowledge. We'll compromise. Okay, Vietnam has now gone into crackdown mode and we're back in acceptable situations. Dex. Let's get the unrest in China crushed. No jokes, please. And at the same time, also the unrest in Kazakhstan, because that makes us vulnerable. Alright, let's continue. 21 February 23. So our research doesn't actually change it that much. I'm okay with that. We are taking over these 3 slots at the moment. So we've completed investigate alien abductions. The attitude is different. I'm already picking up a difference in attitude between these guys and Humanity First. Disappearances are worrying, not in their number. Humans kill each other in greater numbers on an hourly basis, but in what they apply. Abductions imply research, imply selections, but they are actions one performs upon lesser creatures. We capture a shark or a rare bird for study. We do not do the same to our neighbour. You've just been blessed with really good neighbours. As yet, many people still hold out hope of cooperation with the aliens, but as this news spreads, their numbers will plummet. Our list of allies may soon grow thin indeed. So now we have to research alien methods. I like how the game is essentially warning you of what is about to happen once this technology finishes. So we can now research alien methods. Let's change this project here to alien methods, deprioritize Deep System Skywatch, and add a point to alien methods. I think it's now time for our brief window of control in Russia to come to an end. We've abandoned basically all our other locations. We're basically just holding North Korea, so it is time to say farewell. Slava Russi. Hopefully we will return. No, I don't want to direct invest, I want to abandon nation. That will also draw other factions in, like Moths to a Flame. Let's just hope it's anyone but the servants. I'm even happy with Humanity First, to be perfectly honest, even though we don't particularly agree, as long as they don't actually fire the nukes. But if someone like, Exodus or whatever could grab Russia, that would be just swell. We're at 5 points of China. I don't see how I'm going to be able to afford the executive until Clandestine Cells finishes on the 23rd of January. Once it does, our CP limit should increase and we'll be able to continue expanding. But to be honest, China, North Korea, 2 spots down here, and Kazakhstan is probably good enough for me. This is going to be the hard one to hold. We're going to need to do counter crackdown, so I'm building up public opinion as a little bit of a bedrock against inevitable disruption. I want to be able to pull Kazakhstan out of the Eurasian Union, ally it with China, hide it under China's military and nuclear umbrella, and use this as my early boost. This plus China isn't as good as my US, Kazakhstan, Russia start, but it's, I think, good enough to get us to space. Never have I been so happy to lose a control point. Exodus has moved into Russia and taken the party point, which is a bonus to all purge missions against all control points that aren't the executive, which means they get a bonus to purging these ones. Exodus Russia is fine. It's fine by me, as long as they don't come into Kazakhstan, which they shouldn't be able to once I grab the Chinese executive and ally the 2, which is just waiting on the extra counselor hire. They can have it. They can have Russia for a while. I'm just sort of moving Kazakhstan from Russia's influence to China's, just to make sure I've got the early game boost income. Okay, and that should relieve the pressure of trying to hold China. We're up to 216 over 192. Let's go back to alien methods, but more importantly, let's just turn everything back on and see if we can recapture some of these slots. Do we now want to push Deep System Skywatch? I actually think we might. Which of these do we have more odds of holding on to? 197 versus 221. 165. We'll try and hold these two slots, I guess. Or do we just let it wait until March? Does it really matter at this point? I mean, I'd like it to happen sooner rather than later, just to start the 6-month countdown again. We'll do this. I think we'll do this. Now we need to hire another councillor. We backed up some influence, and the next one should improve our control point cap. So what have we got available to us, and what do we need? Mr. Alexander Roberts is still available for hiring. We've got a computer scientist politician, a diplomat with strangely high statistics, a very high investigation and espionage command admin, that's 13 net, but no missions that use either of those. So they would require orgs to give them missions, but that's definitely possible. Those are good base stats. Like very good base stats. Because then if we do that, yeah, much better than the fixer. Because what we could do then, in the interim, is one of these two characters, the inspector, one could be spec'd in INV and one could be spec'd in ESP, plus the extra diplomat sort of doubles as having, I mean, may not be I want to say may not be a permanent hire, but whenever I say that, I jinx it. Opinion leader. Okay, so there's countries where the suspicious is what's giving those intense investigation, espionage. None of these are quick learners. Well, this guy's a quick learner, but he starts pretty crap. What is that? 4, 6, 13. Lower INV and S, quick learner, unifier, +2 persuasion, where cohesion is at least that. So he could break us into some countries, but we're not going to be doing much of that. The hacker is a quick learner, but gives us very little control point cap in the here and now, which is a slight problem. So I actually think we're going to go with this diplomat, at least temporarily. They're also very cheap, and that brings us up to 205 admin cap. Is there anything available to purchase? There are a couple. So I think we want to buy everything, right? But it's the inspector who needs, for the moment, that one can actually investigate. That actually might have belonged on the diplomat because it would give greater benefits there. And then is anyone missing public campaign who could really use it? The diplomat doesn't have public campaign, now he does, which makes him useful. Fantastic, that's a nice little pickup. 216 over 205 is absolutely not critical. I can deal with that, and some of my points are going to get cracked down. Eventually we'll finish management research, people will level, we will be able to cover this gap. China is secure, at least for the moment, until this technology pops, and then all hell is going to break loose. Kazakhstan is now an ally of China, which should protect us when we decide to remove ourselves from the Eurasian Union. So you might wonder why all my councillors are suddenly so interested in, let's just say, some of the less developed areas of Africa. The answer is because Deep System Skywatch is probably going to fire in the next cycle, and if I can grab an extra 5 control points, there's an extra chance that some of our 50% crackdowns trigger on these ones. They'll provide a little bit of decoy chaff that might distract the event, and I'm hoping it provides us just a little bit of cover. Plus, I can set their priorities before I abandon them to just, build space programs or invest 100% in knowledge and welfare or something, help out in some small way. Well, it triggered one day before we were going to take over a few more points, but here it is, Deep System Skywatch. Oh, wait, no, the event didn't fire immediately, so we got one in South Africa.
We've got our people in place.
One in the Great Lakes. We can do Alien Origin.
we still lack support.
Didn't get Niger, got Mali, got Mozambique. Now I guarantee there is almost no time in this video game or almost any other where you'll want to click a button less than the road ahead is fraught on this event. The moment you click it, half of your control points that you have spent the early game accumulating will go away. Almost all of your public opinion, your valuable public opinion, the thing that you started the game with that made your run easier, it seemed, than, that of other factions, that's all going to go away, and nations will move towards extreme values. So just give me a moment before I click this thing. I'm kind of dreading it. Alright, moment's over. Let's go. Oligarchs in Kazakhstan. Mass media in Taiwan. Bureaucracy in China. Party in China. Aristocracy in the Great Lakes. Executive in South Sudan. Mass media South Africa. Okay, so 1 point in Kazakhstan, 1 point in Taiwan, 2 points in China, specifically the bureaucracy and the party. That one's a little bit painful. Also, the swing in public opinion is worrying. That one's a little bit painful because that's the one that gives us a bonus to purge. So if anyone comes in and tries to go after the bureaucracy, that's the one that gives them the bonus. But still, we held on to 4 control points in China. That's okay. I'm a little bit worried about losing this one here, the mass media in Taiwan. I'll secure the executive, lock it down, and then we'll purge anyone out who comes in here if need be. Invading is not really an option considering Taiwan is allied to the United States, and I actually don't want to break that alliance yet. As for the crackdowns in Africa, I really don't care. Holding the executive in Kazakhstan is really important because we continue the executive authority countdown, and we can remove it from the Eurasian Union, we can remove its allies, we can throw people out of this point if necessary. So all in all, about right. We lost 1 of 2 there, 1 of 2 there, 2 of 6 there, and a share over here. In fact, if anything, I think we lost too few of our Africa points. No, we lost about half. Yeah, we lost about half. Okay. So those Africa points I'm going to steadily divest. I'm going to move into other targets now. I've noticed that Saudi Arabia has been abandoned. I'm going to go pick up some points there now that I have control point cap available to me. And the other thing we're going to do is we need to rapidly, in order to defend China, we need to get our popularity back up. Now, do we have the... I'm not sure which of these gives us the bonus. Anyway, the point is, and I've realized that this build a navy thing is actually wrong. I'm not going to need it. Or rather, I'm pretty confident I won't need it. So what we're going to do is this. 100% unity, which in a country like China should turn the public opinion back around really quickly. Will damage our democracy value, but that's okay. Stick with me. As for Kazakhstan, worst case scenario, if we break the alliances and remove it from the Eurasian Union, worst case scenario, we can invade it with China in order to reclaim control of the government, and that'll be okay. So all in all, pretty bad, but it could have been far, far worse. As you can see, our public opinion has gone from that giant wedge dwarfing everyone else to, we're not particularly popular anymore. But you know what? It is what it is. I'll switch to full unity, and then we'll get into damage control mode. Actually, I just want to show you this. Like, a moment ago, a few days ago, we had like nothing. And now, before the next turns even resolve, I think the unity priority in China should push us up to more than 50% popularity. There we are. Like I said, we are damaging the democracy of the country, and we will eventually build a utopia, but right now, we need to secure our control. And the unity is doing exactly that. Once we hit about 75%, I'm going to stop. In fact, now I will. So there we are. Damage more or less undone, and that should also, in terms of our global share, also drive that wedge back out, just because, there's 1.451 billion people in China. So at this point, we're going to go back to the economy. We're going to go economy, 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 and we're going to go knowledge. These ones can be knowledge and economy. Like that. That's sort of spread at the moment. I think we'll go 50, 33, push this, but also push the economy. Actually, I might just do a little bit more economy for the moment, because the whole deal with economy is the earlier you do it, the better. And we have the CP cap right now, and pushing this number will actually increase research and lower resting unrest. In terms of defensive assignments, what we'll do is, even though it will offend some people, I will throw the servants out of Saudi Arabia. I'm going to need full control of that country. I don't think I can control the executive there. I can't, so I'm going to have to offend some people by throwing them out, but I'm going to need Saudi. It's the country I'm going to need after Kazakhstan, China, and Taiwan. The other one I need for this playthrough is Saudi Arabia, so I'm going to get to it. And while we undo the damage, we have researched alien methods. Alien abductions follow a clear pattern. At first, animals were taken, dogs, pigs, goats. After 9 days, those ceased, and all disappearances have been human. This gradually transitioned into a third wave of abductions, this time directed at important or influential targets, particularly in the media, political, and technical spheres. The most likely explanation for this pattern is that animal abductions were a broad-based biological study. Earth general. The second wave was for a narrow biological study, human specific, and the third represents an attempt, the beginning of a larger scale attempt, to gain influence. There is no plausible, friendly explanation for these actions. Discord is spreading. The more vociferously pro and anti alien elements within our ranks are engaging in angry arguments, even coming to blows. Both have demanded that we change our official policy to one more amenable to them. I have stated that we are still attempting to hold a middle ground position. I'm sure this will satisfy neither. I fear our organization will shortly start losing members from both its wings. In other words, the Academy is, unlike other factions, fracturing with these discoveries. Humanity First knew what it was about from the get-go. Like, the aliens were a threat, and then everything they discovered just kept proving the aliens were a threat. So if anything, Humanity First banded together more and more. The Academy is fracturing. Significant numbers of our members have broken away from our organization to join groups more oriented to serving or resisting the aliens. Despite my attempts to stabilize the situation, our ranks continue to thin. In the meantime, we have more bad news. Some of the abductees have returned. While this would otherwise be a positive development, early reports indicate that their behavior has drastically changed. This, combined with the aliens' previous behavior, suggests many possibilities. Few, if any, are good. We can start picking up the labs, or we can do alien flora. I think we do alien flora, at least for now. Actually, no, we'll have a higher bonus on that later. So let's just pick up the information science lab, because we are going to want it. We're going to try and control this slot here, I think. But the Protectorate is putting in a lot of effort, so I'm going to actually have to fight in order to gain control of any of these slots. Doing that might be an option. Problem is, losing China really damaged our science output. Alright, live with me. With Chinese public opinion essentially fortified, what we now need to do is secure the rest of Saudi Arabia, lock down Kazakhstan. We are going to have to throw Exodus out of Taiwan eventually, but it's not the immediate priority. I'm going to secure Saudi first. Hopefully they don't fortify this point in time. We're also sending someone to set national... Okay, we've lost Mali. To set national policy in Kazakhstan for obvious reasons. Okay, interplanetary chemical rockets is one we were waiting for, so we will grab that. This is going to reduce the price of sending rockets to outer space. We're going to need outpost HABs and all the other technology, and then someone's going to have to do mission to the moon. It looks like I'm not going to be able to control this tech slot. That's unfortunate, but we'll still push it forward and try and control the next one. We do have outpost HABs under control. It might even be worth me switching all of my attention over there, move it faster, and make sure I control the slot. Well, you know what's happening here. We're going to leave the Eurasian Union. Watch that boosting come. 0.98, 0.21, much better. Now, as expected, that crackdown point in Kazakhstan has been lost to the servant, so it will need to be reclaimed. Preferably peaceably. We'll defend interest on the executive to protect it. But worst case scenario, we can invade Kazakhstan with China in order to reimpose a government. Whatever it takes in order to hold on to that sweet, sweet boost. I want it back. If anything, this is actually an assistance for us. We weren't getting the boost benefit while it was cracked down. Now that we can take it back from the servants, we can essentially clear the crackdown state and restore our boost income. We're also about to reclaim Taiwan, and Saudi Arabia is for the moment secure. We'll have to abandon some of our temporary African states to free up control point camp to take back Kazakhstan, but then I think we're basically dug in. A few more turns and we should have a secure enough starting position. And Humanity First has done us the favour of grabbing advanced electromagnetism. So let's just have a look at what techs have just dropped, because we got Outpost Habs, Humanity First got electromagnetism, and they've picked nuclear fission in space. What legends! This is what we're going to need for nuclear freighters. So that's actually a really good tech to pick. I think, if I just check here, we're getting very, very close to what we need. So we could go with the various missions, but I think what we really need is space mining and refining, so we can pick up, if it isn't already being researched, it isn't, we'll pick up mass drivers, and we'll try and conquer these research spots, or at least one of them. I'm only putting one slot in at the moment to management research, because I'd like to get space mining up and running as soon as possible. Reclaiming Kazakhstan is necessary so we have the boost to do it, but nuclear fission in space when it drops, that's also going to be handy, because if we can get nuclear freighters before we start launching heavy stuff, it will certainly help. Arrival domestic policy, we're not doing that one, but it will pop at 6 June and make our life better by starting to spawn organizations. Now here's a weird experience for those of you who watched the previous game. In this one, we're allowed to talk to the servants, so I figured we'd do so. They're tolerant, but they're about to get annoyed because I'm about to take a point off them. So my question is there any way I can, get a generous trade off them? And in particular, are they willing to give me some money or anything of value? Not that they really have anything of value. Maybe orgs. They have alpha minerals here. Would you give that to me in exchange for... Okay, almost. Almost. How much cash would you need? Yeah, you need way too much cash. But 21 monthly income is pretty good, and 7% space mining output, 5% economy. If I can find a way to make this trade work, I want to. Oh, is there anything else that I can give them that might be useful? Any of my orgs not particularly handy? Leave it with me, I'll do some bouncing around and find something to sell them, because I kind of want that. And if you're wondering why I sold the servants the ISS, it's because, as prestigious as the ISS is, having it at the start of the game isn't really an advantage. Okay, so the servants have locked down that control point there, so you know what's going to happen. I am going to go through and remove all of Kazakhstan's allies. This is unfortunately expensive, but the real important one here is Russia. Everything else we can deal with. And then we'll spend our last influence rivaling China. And we'll send in the Regime Change Brigade of academic examiners who have identified that there is need for an adjustment of opinion in the government of Kazakhstan. Unfortunate for a utopic run, but throwing the servants out of Kazakhstan is non-negotiable. And while our goal is to build a utopia on Earth, we're going to have to crack some eggs in order to make this particular omelette. So the People's Liberation Army, I think, has a mission. We will assign a national policy in China and go to work.
Standing by.
Political adjustment in process. Stay calm, citizens. Alright, mission accomplished. It did unfortunately hurt Kazakhstan a little bit, but we have reclaimed our control point, which we can now fortify and defend. Let's make that entirely about mission control investment, and Kazakhstan is now back on track. It's not going to be a great country in terms of the economy or the government or research output, but it's already up to 2 points of mission control, which is useful. That's going to be enough to get our first 2 mining bases up. We have space mining and refining researching along with high thrust probes, because Humanity First chose mission to Mars, which means we're actually going to get mission to Mars before we get mission to Moon, which makes high thrust probes a particularly good idea. That's only really going to work if we do nuclear fission and get nuclear freighters in time, so I think we still might want to go to the moon first, but this mission to Mars popping first is an interesting permutation. In any case, I think the stage is set in terms of our opening play. We've secured the island of Taiwan, we've secured mainland China, Kazakhstan is providing our boost income, 3.8 per month, and we have Saudi Arabia, which we are putting almost all of our effort into very slowly democratizing. Why? Because eventually Saudi Arabia is going to break off another nation which I believe feeds from its democracy value, and it will become the means by which we begin to unite Africa. Eventually. This is a long term project, so we better get started now. We do have not a huge amount of room left in our CP cap for when these points in China come off crackdown, but that's not until 2024 in April. And when we do still have some holdings in Africa, which we can abandon. We're a council of 5. Research is okay. Mission control is okay. Boost is okay. Quick look around the world before we close out. Russia is now fully under the control of Operation Exodus. Last game it was Europe that was their base. This game it looks like it's going to be Russia. In Europe, France is primarily under the control of the initiative, as is Germany. In fact, the initiative is strongest in Europe in general. The resistance is flying the flag in places like Italy, but the initiative is really only a couple of points away from securing the largest powers, and they have full control of the Benelux, so the corpos are basically ruling Europe. The United Kingdom is a mess with the Protectorate in control of the executive slot. Africa, as always, is interesting. India has become the home of the resistance with massive public support. One humanity first point, but the rest are all resistance. Pakistan is neutral, interestingly. If we weren't going after Saudi, that would have been an opportunity to go back to there. South America is split, looks like. Mexico is a mess. America is untaken. Exodus did took Canada, but it looks like they abandoned their points in order to allow them to afford Russia. So that's the world that we find ourselves in at this stage. What we really need is for the Chinese points to come off crackdown, but I think we've survived the worst of it. We have our councillors, we've got our skills, we've got reasonable diplomatic relations with everyone, and I think we've got a plan from here. So I hope you enjoy the concept. We are going to cheese the Earth layer a little bit because of the challenge and because I think you guys want to see map painting more than you want to see me struggle with artificial difficulty. But once we get into space, we'll introduce a few more house rules to basically prevent me cheesing the Hydra and to make the game a little more interesting as opposed to just more difficult. I hope you enjoy the concept. I hope you enjoy the faction. I look forward to reading the comments and the responses, and I'll see you all again soon.